Hello, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my mid lane tier list for patch 14.7. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. So there weren't a huge amount of changes this patch. We saw, I believe, 4 in total. Changes towards Galio, Lux, Karma, and Smolder, of which none of these have had a huge amount of impact. They don't move too far from their current positions. But other than that, I want to move some other things around and kind of go over the tier list. So to begin with, let's start with D tier. Smolder is still the single champion here. He is still underperforming within both solo lanes. This tends to be because both solo lanes opt into some more tanky and AP variants, where the buffs were mostly focused around buffing up his crit and his armor, making him able to contest in the bot lane a lot more. This would be like the Essence or even the Vori, RFC kind of build variations. But yeah, he's still struggling within the mid lane. I'd recommend avoiding this champion. He falls within the D tier. Moving up to the C tier, Corki is also underperforming quite heavily. I'd recommend going like the Trinity crit route, or like an Essence Reaver crit route over the Malignance Eclipse Manamune route, which doesn't tend to perform as well, especially after the nerfs, so this build does not have anywhere near as much merit to go. But overall, Corki definitely underperforming at the moment, more of a C tier pick. Yeah. LeBlanc got hit pretty hard, obviously, in the past by the fact that she was very dominant in pro on her AD build variations. These days, both AD and AP are still struggling a significant amount. I would not recommend this champion for mid-elo. I'd hardly recommend it for high, honestly. There are lots of limitations with this champion. She does have really strong assassin capabilities and is very safe, but oftentimes that isn't enough to just merit picking the champion, and she falls within the C tier at the moment. Orianna really fell from grace. Obviously, spoke about it last time. Definitely took a big hit with the loss of some of the items from last season. Definitely valued having a lot of haste with some of her build variations, like the old Leandri Lucidity Cosmic build kind of thing. That gave you so much haste and was very powerful in that space. This season, the value of like Archangel's Rush compared to like Luna's Companion, both can be good situationally, but she's definitely struggling a lot more. The itemization isn't as strong here, and she falls within the C tier. Did also get nerfed towards the end of last season. Galio is going to move up to the B tier. He got buffed this patch. He's definitely performing a lot better. He's getting buffed again the patch after, so it'll be lots of Galio buffs within 3 patches. I really enjoy this champion. I think he's great off like Roa and Roa and Shirelia's builds. Both these work really nicely. I'd really recommend trying the Shirelia's build. I've had a lot of success with that. You can run on like really low econ, just play for your bot lane, and you can kind of like enable people really easily. Of course, if you want a bit more carry potential, things like Lich Bane still do exist and do function on this champion. They're just not as performant, as he's definitely being pushed towards more supportive, more durable builds. But he is a good B tier pick. Alright, back down to the C tier. So the last 2 champs which are going to wrap this out are Ryze and Ziggs. Neither of these champs are performing particularly great at the moment. Ryze, in his case, is being buffed next patch in 14.8. Ziggs performs a bit better in the bot lane, but you can have success on this champion in the mid lane. This would be like Luna's Companion. Leandri's can be opted into, but like Archangels tend to be pretty strong here. Rabadons, and then just standard like mage items. You can go defensive, you can pick a pen, stuff like this. But yeah, he's more of a C tier pick at the moment. Not as much merit on this champion as some of the other poke options. Vel'Koz going to be in the B tier. This is the Shirelia Vel'Koz. I spoke about this recently. Definitely having a lot more success on the pick with this Shirelia build. You can still opt into things like Luna's Companion, but yeah, definitely try the Shirelia's variant. Tends to be very successful. Azir going to be in the B tier. Azir obviously very much a pro staple at the moment, probably the highest pro presence pick alongside Ari. I believe that to be true. Of course, he did get disabled for a patch recently, which is why it might not suggest as much, but definitely back being a prio pick again. We're seeing ASOL counters come through, but within solo queue, tends to be a lot harder to pilot. I wouldn't recommend this champion in mid-elo. Of course, the higher ranks you climb, the more time you put into this champion. He definitely does rise. He has a very high skill cap, of course, and yeah, he's a solid B tier option. If you put the games in, like learn the rune sets, what you want, like whether it's like your Halo Blades, your Grasp, your Fleet, stuff like this. Yeah, he's solid B tier pick. Victor also going to be in the B tier. Victor doesn't really have as much of a high skill ceiling. He just isn't as good as a lot of the other champs at the moment. Definitely struggles to come online. Very reliant on like the Lich Bane spike, and then like picking up things like Luden's Companion, Rabadon, and stuff like this. But yeah, he's definitely not performing as well at the moment. I'd recommend probably taking runes which are going to help you through laning phase, whether this is like the Airy Scorch variation and running like Resolve Tree. There are options there, but yeah, more of a B tier pick at the moment. I wouldn't recommend playing Victor. Karma, going to be in the B tier. Karma obviously got buffed this patch, so she's definitely a bit better. The E empowered shield is a lot stronger, making her more of a supportive option. The W route also went up earlier ranks. Is this enough to push her out the B tier? Not at the moment. She's still struggling with the fact that she had her damage hit pretty heavily the patch before. Not so much the damage, more her DPS, her ability to output continuous rotations of spell got hit. But yeah, she was kind of mid B tier now. Still not doing as great. Malzahar going to be in the B tier. He is definitely able to compete against a lot of champions once you have 1-2 items. Before that, you want to be starting things like Sapphire to like power through your Lost Chapter. This is alongside like Futures Market. And once you have your items, you're definitely a lot stronger within the game. He's very low elo skewed. QSS obviously really hinders this champion and his ability to kind of like carry single out targets. Of course, most of the time it's marksman you're aiming for. And yeah, you can be punished by QSS buys, but he falls more in the B tier at the moment. I'd recommend other champions over Malzahar, simply because he's he's reliable once you hit like certain thresholds, but not as reliable early on in the game, and oftentimes the game can snowball out of your control pretty quickly. So Malphite, obviously this one's a bit of a discussion point at the moment. We've seen Lord Dolby make a video on this. This is like the AP First Strike Nash's Lich Bane kind of variation. Definitely has like merit in the fact that you do a huge amount of damage, you have huge burst, your split push potential is very strong. Would I recommend this a huge amount? It definitely has angles where you can like operate it. It's not a build for every game, and sometimes you do very much want to go tank Malphite. There is a lot of value in tank Malphite. But it definitely does put him towards the high end of the B tier, kind of low A tier. Malphite is a relatively simplistic champion to play, and honestly, I recommend watching the video. You can learn a lot through like what the person does. It's like Ghost TP setup, and yeah, it's an interesting watch. There's definitely merits to Malphite. Gonna be in the B tier for the moment though, but yeah, has strengths. Akali also going to be in the B tier. She's getting buffed next patch. At the moment, she just isn't performing to the level that she should be. Lich Bane obviously being tagged down a significant amount. Storm Surge had the same kind of problem. Same goes for Protobelt. All these items have been tagged down throughout the season. Storm Surge should be one of Akali's best in sort of items. Of course, it's like the premier AP assassin option, but it just isn't quite there at the moment. You are still going like your Lich Bane. And then there are options there. Storm Surge, of course, if you're snowballing, but like Rabadons, Liandry's in certain situations can be quite nice. And then Crypt Bloom, Void, Defensive. Yeah, it kind of sits in the B tier at the moment. It'll be interesting to see where she comes out with the buffs. Syndra is going to be in the B tier as well. Not hit as hard as Orianna, of course, but still not performing to the same level as she was. Like this is like Luden's Companion, Archangels, both of these, once again, competitive options on a lot of the mages. Hui is another example of this, but yeah, she's going to be in the B tier for the moment. Not as she definitely has strengths. Her EQ is a very powerful ability. Her damage and her single target capabilities are very strong, but can have a really hard time getting through frontline at the moment. And yeah, she finds herself in the B tier. Xerath, definitely a lot weaker with the current itemization compared to last season. I've talked about this a couple of times. Options are like Luden's Companion, Archangels, even Malignants. I've seen a couple people go Malignants, Xerath, and there's definitely merit with your ultimate. If you're able to consistently land shots, whether this is because the enemies don't have a huge amount of mobility, are relatively slow. Yeah, there's strengths there, but more of a B tier pick at the moment, not performing as well as last season. Zed going to be in the B tier. This is like the Eclipse or like Voltaic Cyclosword builds. He's fine off these. He definitely does do a decent amount of damage, and of course if you put a lot of time into Zed, then he does have a very high skill ceiling, but in his current state he's more of a B tier pick. I'd recommend some of the other AD options over Zed. Hui also going to be in the B tier, is getting buffed next patch alongside a couple of the other champions on this list. This is Archangels, Luden's Companion. Horizon Focus tends to be a good pickup on this champion, kind of similar to Vel'Koz and Xerath, where you can consistently proc this item. I believe Rylai, also solid option on Xerath, and one over here. I think Azir definitely has some synergies with it, but that's something which needs to be tested a bit more. But yeah, Hui, more of a B tier pick at the moment. Very... Okay, mid skill mage. He does have like high skill, kind of like high reaction responsibility with the abilities and like being able to rotate them correctly and what you need in that situation. But he's definitely more of a B tier pick at the moment. There are more consistent AP mages which you can play, and you can definitely gain LP on a lot easier. Yasuo going to be in the B tier. Yasuo definitely struggling a lot more compared to Yone, who is getting buffed next patch, weirdly enough. I suppose they are buffing Yone compared to Yasuo. I wouldn't be surprised if they had buffed both. They are trying to make MSI exciting, but yeah, Yasuo isn't getting buffed, isn't performing as well as Yone. This will still be the Kraken, i.e. Shield Bow, and then like Iceborne, Death Stance, GA, Wits Flex variation. But yeah, he's not performing as well at the moment. He's more early game skewed, and definitely does hurt him. Lissandra also going to be in the B tier. Malignance into like heavy AP builds can work quite nicely. Of course, you can still go the util route, but that tends to be a bit more team comp reliant. I'd recommend going solo carry variants if you are playing in solo queue. But yeah, B tier pick. Jace also going to be in the B tier. Jace mid isn't bad. Like, if you put the time into playing Jace mid, he's a very solid pick. I believe he's began to start seeing a bit more competitive. You are looking at things like Yomu's Opportunity. Schroeder's Grudge is still a nice pickup if you're going down that lethality route. Hubris is an option if you're snowballing, but you need to be really egregiously far ahead, otherwise it does feel really hard to build this item. Manamune, I spoke about it last time, might start becoming less of a necessary pickup on Chase. You might just sit on tier. I haven't done too much digging into this, but from whatever I've analyzed any data of Jace, Manamune does not seem to be performing as well as it should be, especially for like a AD custom champion. Yeah, I don't know, but there's research to be done here, but it's definitely something worth talking about. Zoe going to be in the B tier. This is like Lich Bane Rush Zoe. There's definitely strengths to this build. Of course, you can opt into like heavy AP items afterwards. Definitely scales really hard off gold. Doesn't really scale a huge amount of levels. Not that kind of champion. But yeah, B tier at the moment. Kiana and Talon moved down from my A tier into my B tier. Kiana, very, very elite skewed. Probably one of the most elite skewed mid lane assassin picks in the game. Of course, if you snowball on this champion, like with like Profane, Opportunity, Yomu's, Cycler Sword even, Hubris even, if you're like really heavily snowballing, then yes, she can take over games really comfortably 1v9. But you do need to put a lot of time into this champion. She can be very hard to pilot. Her laning phase is very challenging. If you like concede too much early game, it can be really hard to like build that back up and kind of compete later on. But yeah, more of a B tier pick at the moment. I've kind of dropped her from the A tier. She is very elite skewed. Talon in a way is similar, not as egregious as Kiana, but definitely a bit elite skewed. He can operate in both mid and jungle, looking at the same kind of thing. The Yomu's, the Opportunity, the Grudge, Edge, of course, being all very nice items for these champions. Same goes for Jace, Edge of Night, of course, being very nice on him. And yeah, all these kind of sit in the B tier at the moment. High B, low A tier picks. Vladimir kind of sits at the bottom of the A tier. Actually, I'm going to do the last round. So someone said Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is going to be in the B tier. The AP Cho'Gath isn't anywhere near as good this season. He definitely lost out, losing things like Everfrost. It was a very strong item on him. Robo Cho'Gath just isn't as... It doesn't fulfill what he needs as much. It's less reliable. It's not as kind of like AP tailored. Doesn't really have the haste you need. And for that reason, he's going to be in the B tier. Of course, Tank Cho still a fine variation, but these would be builds like Halo Blades, the Grasp, the Arcane Comet. No options there, but yeah, for the most part, he's a B tier pick at the moment. His kind of merit is his simplicity to play. Solid tank frontline option. So yeah, Vladimir going to lead off the A tier. He's quite close to the B tier, if anything, at the moment. He's definitely fallen from, like, being... I put Vladimir in my OP tier at the beginning of this season. He's definitely fallen from there. Of course, he did receive, like, nerfs through some of the items. Riftmaker was a big one. He was very big abuser of this item. Of course, Leandri is also very nice on Vladimir, being able to consistently output a lot of DPS and being able to rotate a lot of combos. Having a health AP item which kind of fulfills that is very nice for him. But yeah, he's more towards the low end of the A tier now. Still a fine option. Vex, recommended only as a direct counterpick to high mobility champions. Very, very strong in that situation, like S plus tier. More generalistically, she's more like an A tier, B tier pick. So definitely merit to this champion. Very strong AP snowball assassin. There are better options, which can be either easier to play and execute, or harder to play, but like can be executed in a more efficient way. The likes of Katarina, if you can snowball on this champion, she can very comfortably close out games. I'd recommend the Nash's build on Cat, but we'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, Fizz, moving on, Lichbane, early game skew champion. Of course, if you can snowball on this pick, great counter pick to ASOL. Yeah, there's merits here, but more of an A tier pick at the moment. Definitely got hit towards the beginning of the season. Yone, going to be in the A tier. This is either Bork or Krakenslayer, depending on enemy comp, i.e. shield bow, same as Yasuo, where you're like going into these like Iceborne, Death Stance, GA Wits End variations later on into the game. But he's a solid A tier pick. Definitely a lot of skill expression and can really easily be punished if you do fall too far behind. Bork doesn't make him a bit more stat checky though, so do be aware of that. Aurelia is going to be my A tier. Aurelia mid is what I'd recommend over Aurelia top in a lot of situations, as the pick can operate quite nicely within the mid lane, can like mitigate a lot of AP assassins, AD assassins with her W. Oftentimes can trade back quite nicely. The lane is shorter, which can kind of play against you in a lot of situations when you do need that chase of the top lane. Of course, Bork can be a bit less valuable of a spike here, even though it is mandatory. Like you have to go Bork in every game. Against like non-health stackers, but like there should sometimes be health stackers within the mid lane. Some of them do just pick up raw health items early on, think like Vladimir with like his Leandries. But yeah, already more of an A tier pick at the moment. Lux also going to be in the A tier, got buffed on the passive and the Q, I believe. Did a bit, definitely helps her Rabadon spike if you are going like Malignance or Luna's Companion into Horizon Focus into Rabadons. There's definitely a lot more power in that build, a bit more damage on the Q and the passive, but more of an A tier pick at the moment. Twisted Fate is going to be my A tier. He did get hit on both the AD and the AP builds over recent patches, but he's still performing fine. You can still opt into both depending on what you need in your comp. For AD builds, I'd recommend Fleet or Tempo. PTA still viable, of course, but yeah, Fleet tends to be what you want to go, and then you can go down like the static Ginsu's or Kraken Ginsu's. There are options there. Stormraiser, Terminus, also fine items on the AD Twisted Fate build. For AP, you're looking at more like Lichbane, Roa, and that tends to be what you want in the game. Australia is also a nice option on that build. Pantheon, going to be my A tier. He's a solid pick. Very simple to play AD champion. If you get the combo, well, not even just the combos, if you just harass during laning phase effectively, you're running like your Mana Flow, your Scorch, Presence of Mind in certain situations, and you're running like PTA, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, or Last Stand in certain situations, then yeah, he's got a lot of power. He does a huge amount of damage early laning phase. Can be very oppressive to play against Pantheon. He doesn't scale very well. That is something definitely punishable by the champion. But yeah, merits towards his strength in laning phase and the fact that he is great global pressure with his ultimate. Katarina gonna be within my A tier. Spikes really hard on the Nashers, like Shadow Flame, Rabadon's build in a lot of situations. Leandris is definitely viable in this pick as well, and there's definitely merit there. But yeah, more of an A tier pick at the moment. Nico going to be in the A tier. Very strong competitive pick. Definitely like one of the staples at the moment. But within solo queue, more of an A tier pick. She still has strengths in her builds. Rocket Belt, of course, is pretty mandatory at this point for first item. But like Rabadons, of course, on like defensive, Cryptbloom, stuff like this can all work quite nicely on her, but she is a solid A tier pick. Brand is very low elo skewed, definitely sits towards the S plus tier within like very low elo. Within mid, I'd recommend him more as an A tier pick. He's a mobile, which can be very punishing, but his damage, his team fighting is undeniably strong. Like there is so much merit towards that. But yeah, more of an A tier pick at the moment. Silas got jungle buffs this patch, didn't do anything for mid, obviously. I mean, other than being able to like maybe poach raptors in certain situations, he's still very strong off like Lich Bane, Storm Surge in certain situations when like Rabadons. First strike is optional. Electrocute tends to be more of a staple at this point, but still a very solid pick. Tristana got hit by static being nerfed, opts towards Kraken Slayer a lot more now. But like Kraken, Novori, Bloodthirster can be quite nice in a lot of situations. You can also opt into LDR later on, Shield Bow if you need a bit more defensive, GA, Phantom Dancer. Yeah, Tristana, a very solid AD pick. Echo, this is like the Lich Bane build. You don't tend to go Nashers as much in the mid lane. This is like the hit and run Echo, where you're going like Electrocute and then like kind of picking what you need in the game, and then like Mana Flow Scorch or Transcendence Scorch, and then you like play E level 1, and you kind of just play very heavy on your E harass with Lich Bane. It's even more oppressive, and you do a huge amount of damage with Electrocute Burst, Passive Burst, Q, coming back through them. Yeah, there's lots of damage there. Very solid pick. Can catch a lot of people off guard with this one. Swain going to be in the S tier, so Swain, very solid option at the moment. Definitely benefiter of Rylai, Malignance, Leandri, Riftmaker, Zonya, stuff like this. These can all work quite nicely on him. That tends to be just your standard core. You don't have much variation. It tends to be pretty locked to that, but still a great team fighting, probably a great team fighter, probably one of the best frontline team fighting options in the game, especially into multi-man fights. Zonya's does make him even more oppressive to play against, but like third item spike or fourth item spike, depending on when you pick it up, gives him so much power. But he does tend to fall off later on into the game when people are able to opt into things like LDR and like percentage health damage. Can definitely be a bit punishing towards this pick. Aksham, solid S tier pick, very good AD ranged lane bully. There are definitely spacing kind of things you need to learn with this pick. It's very important to like play the lane correctly, as that's where most of his strength lies. Being able to use your E effectively to avoid ganks and to pressure the enemy. Remember, you get a reset of this ability whenever you do get a takedown, so you can dive and then kill and then disengage if you are being followed by enemy jungle. But yeah, there's also strengths from this champion, like the Kraken Slayer, Storm Razor, static sometimes even, but like tends to not be as optimal as like the other two options. And then like IE, Collector is an option, Ginsu's if you're going like an on-hit variant, but I'd recommend just going more AD damage. IE tends to be pretty nice in this space. Neferi, also going to be in the S tier. Great low elo, Snowball Assassin. Very simple to play. W's a nice point to click. Q's a pretty easy to land skill shot. E is just nice upfront damage and good dash. And then R gives her a lot of base stats and tends to make her able to stat stick a lot of enemies. And yeah, great S tier pick. Diana, we've seen Diana in competitive now. It looked terrible, so that was great. This was like phase rush Diana. I'd recommend just playing Electrocute and solo queue with alongside like Mana Flow Scorch. Play her as a lane bully. She spikes really hard on 4-5 on like those second, third, and then 4-5 points on Q. Really works quite nicely on these. It does fall off later into the game once people do have a bit of magic resist, and if you aren't able to consistently find the leads, then that can definitely hurt. But yeah, solid S tier pick. Annie, also going to be in the S tier. This is like Malignance, Rylai, Rabadon, stuff like this. Spikes really hard off a bunch of these items, makes Tibbers really hard to play against. And yeah, just a lot of power in this pick. Cassiopeia, going to be here as well. This is like Roa, Archangels, Rylai, I mean, honestly, you have a lot of options, but overall, Champ's really strong against high mobility. Her control is really hard to match. Her spacing can also be really oppressive. Her QE combo and then just run you down, super hard to play against for a lot of champions, unless you have phase rush or you have some way of like disengaging from it. ASO, well, actually not ASO. Kassadin, okay, I'm going to wrap up the S tier. So Kassadin, Talia, Anivia and Veigar wrap up my S tier. All four of these picks have really strong merits at the moment. In Kassadin's case, his scaling's great, works really nicely off like Roa, Archangel's Malignance. Talia, really oppressive in laning phase, tends to spike really hard here. Roa is like the Luden's companion. Archangels, I don't believe Archangels is mandatory, but definitely merit to having tier, being able to spam out abilities. And then things like Rabadons can be quite nice on her. Anivia, a great pick, alongside items like Malignance, can be really oppressive to play against. against the wall VR can be really obnoxious. Vigar, very simple to play champion, does a huge amount of damage, a great scaling pick. And definitely a lot of merit here. Remember, Shreddies is very strong on Vigar, a solid third, fourth item pickup. And then we have 3 champions left. So Ari and Asol are going to wrap up the S plus tier. Asol, incredibly strong scaling. I've moved him up from the S tier. I'm glad people have started to pick up on this pick being incredibly strong and competitive as well. We've seen Caps play it. I believe we've seen all 4 regions play it, in fact, as like a direct counter into Azir. But even then, it's worked really nicely, even not into the Azir match. The scaling's great. The lane bullying is really nice if you're Q starting with like Q and then like level 2 QW, and you can chase down your opponent and then like go into like Rylai. Leandry tends to be a really strong 2 item core. In Ari's case, incredibly safe, does a huge amount of damage. This would be like the Lichbane Malignance build for solo queue. You don't tend to see Lichbane in competitive, as it tends to be a bit more snowball reliant as an item. But yeah, Lichbane Malignance, and then you can opt into a lot of things. CDR if you need it. It's like Cosmic Drive. If you want a bit more tank killing capability, then things like Void, Crypt Bloom, Leandry can all work nicely here. Bit more damage. Rabadon's is a great option. And yeah, very solid aspect. And when we're left with Nasus, I know a lot of people have talked about Nasus. He got buffed this patch. And actually, I'm going to put him in the S tier. So Nasus is a very strong pick in the mid lane. I believe I remember at the beginning of the season, there was someone who played almost exclusively Conqueror Nasus mid. And like hit really high elo on the EUS ladder. I was watching some of his games, and then more recently the pick has been buffed. It was already a relatively strong mid laner, and now I would definitely recommend giving it a go. Lots of power in his W, his E, his Q gives him a huge amount of damage. He can struggle trading against mages, but because of the amount of sustain he has within his kit, through the lifesteal, through Doran Shield, Second Wind, Fleet. Yeah, it's really hard to move this champion. If he's running TP, he can come back to lane. If he's like over chunked, Ghost can give him like lots of safety if you do opt into that. Flash, of course, can still be opted into. But yeah, there's lots of merit towards this pick. He does a huge amount of damage, great scaling. Once you hit level 6, it's pretty hard to actually just 1v1 this target, as his W can make it really oppressive in the 1v1 situations. And yeah, lots of strength there, so solid S tier pick. And those are my thoughts here. Thank you guys for watching. See you next one. Bye.